Alright, welcome guys, welcome to this OCP JP workshop. First of all, wishing you all a great 2015. Okay, so let's begin. The first thing that I'm going to do in this workshop is I'm just going to give you a quick overview of OCP JP exam in general. There's nothing much to talk about it, but just few details about it that you need to know. After that, I will straight away go into certain topics of OCP JP which are quite tricky, and we will be actually going through a detailed training of it in this workshop. Right, so we will have quite a few problems, some challenging problems, and a wonderful technique which can be actually used to solve those kind of problems. This will also give you an idea of how the training will be conducted in actual. Okay, and in the end we will have the details of the upcoming training. Plus there will be a lucky draw in the end. So please do stay till the end. There will be a lucky draw and some Amazon shopping vouchers to be won. By the way, Satish Pradhan, my voice is clear, right? No issues in that?
Yeah, no issues. No issues.
Okay. I just hope more people join, because otherwise the lucky draw will be between you two only. Okay. Okay, so about the OCP JP6 exam. So OCP JP6 exam, as you know, is Oracle Certified Professional Java SE6 Programmer exam. Exam number is there, you can refer it, and the exam duration is 150 minutes. The number of questions that you need to solve in it is 60. But the most important thing to note here is that there is no prior certification that you need to appear for OCP JP6 exam, unlike OCP JP7. So OCP JP7 exam has been also introduced, but it has a prerequisite. You need to be either OCP JP6 certified, right, or you need to be an OCP JA7 certified, which is an associate level exam, or you can say a very beginner level exam, right? But its cost is basically almost the same as OCP JP7. So if you want to be OCP JP7 certified, you will need to pay double the cost. Right? Whereas OCP JP6 is just one exam, you don't need any prior certification, and it has been the most popular certification of Java till now. So we will be actually focusing on OCP JP6 and not on OCP JP7. A little bit about me before we go into the details of the topic that I wanted to discuss. I'm OCP JP certified. I also did my OCWCD certification. I have training experience of more than 4 years. I was previously the trainer of WizLabs. I am quite sure you might have heard of WizLabs. I was giving trainings there. Now I have started trainings of my own. And I have trained well over more than 1,000 professionals. All right. We will come to the details of the training that will be coming a bit later. Let's begin with the actual content of the workshop. So here is a problem, first of all, that I would like you to solve. I hope the font size is clear. Let me know if you're not able to see the code properly. Okay, so if you are able to see the code properly, you have about 3 to 4 minutes. Please try to see if you can get what will be the output of the above code. Okay, so this is the simple problem that we are beginning with. We have a lot of other problems to deal with in this workshop. If you want any clarity on anything in this code, just let me know.
The first output is 10, system.out.println. What is that, C1 or E1? I don't know exactly, but E1.id.
Yes, it is even.id, not C1.
Yeah, it's E1.id. The first, oh sorry, not the first one.
So there are how many? 3 system.outs. One is this one and 2 are in the end, right? So you need to tell me 3 outputs.
What is it, value 36 or 30 in update method?
Oh, it is 30, 30.
Okay. It's too small font, I cannot see it properly.
Oh, sure. I will just increase the font. Just give me a minute, Satish.
Did you increase the font?
Oh, sorry, my screen was actually frozen, so you probably might not have seen it earlier. Is this better or should I increase it a little bit more?
No, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine.
Okay.
The first system with order printing is value 30.
Okay. Let me just note it here. Okay.
Second one is E1.RD 41. Sorry, just a second. Yeah, that's right. And the last one we use et.id. Is 40.
Okay, great. 30, 41 and 40. Vladan, what about you? Alright, so guys, before I actually solve this problem, let me tell you a technique which you can actually use to solve these kind of problems and few complex ones which will be coming a bit later. Okay, so for that, let me just start from a little very basic stuff, and then I will go to a little higher stuff. So what I'm going to talk about is memory management in Java. right? And this problem is all about memory management in Java, which we saw. If you know how to put different variables where in memory structure, right, then you will be able to solve this problem quite easily. Okay, so first of all, let's see what all actually happens when you try to run a Java program. Okay, so in the beginning what you have is a .java file. Okay, this .java file basically contains classes. Okay, there in a single .java file you can define multiple classes, and of course there can be a single class per Java file as well. Now whenever you say Java and then you basically provide the name of the class that you want to run, right, whatever it is, like com dot hello, right, what actually is going to happen is operating system is going to give certain amount of memory to the JVM. Okay, so a process called JVM will be started as soon as you give this command, right? It will get some memory from the operating system, right? And whatever memory it gets from the operating system, it will divide it into few sections. The most important sections that you need to know are following. There will be a section called heap. Again, I think font size is okay, or should I increase here a little bit as well? Probably a little bit, right? Okay, now it should be fine. Okay, so the first section is heap. Then there is a section called class data. Okay, and then there will be a section called stack. Okay, now what is the purpose of these three sections? Right, the purpose of these three sections is following. In heap, you are going to store any object that you are going to create while running your Java program. Right? While running your Java program, any object that is created will always be created in this heap section. Right? And while executing any method, right, any local variables that you create, they will be created in the stack section. Now what is this class data section then? This class data section is meant for storing your .class files that have been loaded in the JVM's memory and the static variables of that particular class. Right? So for example, let's say this hello.java is hello.class is residing somewhere in your file system, and when you say java.com.hello, it is able to find your hello.class. What is going to happen in this class data section, let's say at some location 100x or whatever, right? It will load your hello.class. It needs to do that, right? Because otherwise your hello.class, the bytecodes are residing in the file system. You need to load them in the memory, right? Because otherwise JVM will not know which method to execute, what are the instructions present inside that method, etc. Right? So this hello.class will be loaded, right? There will be different sections here. So for example, there will be a section for static variables. We will be in fact using this memory diagram to solve this problem very shortly, right? So there will be a section for static variables. So if hello class is containing any static variables, they will be created here. And of course, there will be a section for methods as well. Mind you, all this information is coming from the bytecodes of hello class. Okay. Now, one of the methods in this class actually should be static void main method, which takes a string argument, right? Because this is how a Java program actually starts, right? Whenever you load a class and you say java.com.hello, for example, after loading the class, JVM will search for a main method inside it with this signature, right? So please note, all this thing has been already done, right, without even checking for the main method, right? Now when the class is loaded, JVM will check for the main method, right? It will find it there. It will check what are the bytecode instructions present inside it, and it will simply execute them. Okay. Now let's do following. Enough of talking of this diagram. Let's actually make one diagram for the problem that we are solving, right? That will actually give you much better idea of this. So just let me divide the screen properly so that you can see the diagram and the code at the same time. Alright guys, so this should be good. I think both the things are visible at the same time. Okay, let's begin. So assume that JVM has started and these three sections have been created: heap, class data, and the stack section inside it, right? Now in the class data section, you will obviously have employee class that would be already loaded for this particular example, right? Because we are trying to execute the main method of the employee class. So at 100x location in the class data, let's say you have employee.class which has been loaded. Okay, it does have a main method, so the execution will start from here. Right now, every method invocation in Java, right, gets a portion in the stack section. So whenever you execute a method in Java, it gets a portion in the stack section. So what will happen? A main stack will be created here corresponding to the main method, right? Okay. Now any local variables you create inside the main method, right, will be created in the stack section. Well, local variables are those variables which are declared inside a method, right? So for example, this val is a local variable of the main method, whereas this id equal to 20 is not a local variable of the main method because it is declared outside of it. It is in fact an instance variable of the employee class. We will see what an instance variable is once we execute few lines of code as well. Okay, so the first line in the main method is int val equal to 10, right? So what you can do is in this main stack, you can say val, right? Just create a local variable here called val and give it the value 10. Okay, now this val is a primitive data type, right? The next variable which we are going to see in the next line, employee even, is an object reference variable. There is a difference between two. The difference between the two is the value of a primitive data type is the actual data itself. So for example here, the value of val is 10 itself, right? But this will not be the case with the object reference variable, right? How? Okay, for that let's execute the next line, which is saying employee even equal to new employee, right? What is going to happen here? You're going to create a local variable here called even, right? Now object reference variable always have their value as memory addresses, right? The memory address at which the actual object is stored, right? So let's say the actual employee object is stored in the heap at some 1000x location. Okay, actual object is stored at 1000x location in heap, as I mentioned earlier, right? That all the objects in Java are always created in the heap section, right? So this even is actually pointing to 1000x location in the heap. Now please note that this employee class is having an instance variable inside it. What are instance variables? Instance variables are those variables which belong to an object of that class. So each object will have its own copy of that variable, right? Remember, static variables are created here. So for example, let me actually add one static variable here, right? We might not be using it in the code here, right? But I will show you how to represent it in the memory diagram. And in the next problem, we will be using it extensively. So let's say we have a static variable here as well. Let's say SID, right? And its value was, let's say, 1000. So where that static variable will go? It will go in the class data section where the employee.class is residing, right? So here you can actually, for your reference, just create a static v, whatever name you want to give it, right? Static v, let's say. And here you can say SID. And since it is a primitive data type, its value will be 1000 itself. Okay, but this ID is an instance variable and it is not a static variable, right? So it will be created inside the object, right? So here you have employee object at 1000x location. So here you will say ID is there and it is having the value 20. Any doubts so far? Any questions? Okay, let's continue then. So the next line is even.id equal to val, right? Even.id equal to val. Let's see how JVM will evaluate this line, right? So what JVM will do is JVM will see what is even. It will go to the main stack. It will see, okay, even's value is 1000x. So I need to go to the 1000x location, right? And here it will try to find out and see if there is anything called ID. So it will say, okay, there is something called ID there, which I need to change now. What do I need to change it to? I need to change it to val, which is defined in the main stack, which is 10. So you just go there and you update it to 10. Okay, so this becomes 10. Next, what we are doing is we are calling another method called update, right? We are calling another method called update. So a new stack will be created here for this update method. So update stack will be created here, right? As I said, each invocation of a method results in a new stack in the stack section, right? So an update stack is created for this update method. If you see the definition of update method, it is having one input parameter E, employee E, right? Which is in fact a local variable of that method as well. So you can say it is a local input variable, right? So we will create it in the stack as well, E, right? Now what is the initial value of E? The initial value of E is whatever you passed it when you call the update method, right? So what should I write after E here? Can you guys tell me? So as soon as the update method starts, E will be having some value, right? Which you can see we are passing from the main method. What will be it? 1000x. Absolutely correct, right? Because E1 is pointing to 1000x. So E will also point to 1000x. Right? Now things are very simple. These three lines can be executed seamlessly. So you say E.id equal to 30 inside the update method. Again, you see where E is pointing to, it is pointing to 1000x. You go there and you update the ID value to 30. Right? Now, look at the next line very carefully. It is E equal to new employee. Right? So whenever you call constructor, right? You call the constructor in Java by using the new operator, right? So whenever you say new some class name, you are basically creating a new object in the heap, right? So this will actually create a new object in the heap, let's say at 2000x. Right? And the ID value will be initially 10, right? You can see that, oh sorry, 20, not 10, it will be 20. You can see the initial value of ID is 20, right? So whenever you create an employee object, the ID will get the value 20, right? So that 20 is created here. Okay, and the address of this new object is 2000x, right? So we said E equal to new employee, right? So this E will now become 2000x. I hope this step is clear. Great. So next line is E.id equal to 50. All you need to do is just check where E is pointing to, which is 2000x. Go there, change the value of ID there from 20 to whatever it is, which is 50. Okay, and that's it. After that, update method is over. As soon as a method is over, right? As soon as an invocation of a method is over, right? What happens is that its stack is also removed, right? So that's it. It's gone now. Because you have called the update method, so its stack is gone now. Okay? So we return back to the main method in which the line is system.out.println e1.id. It's very simple. You just check whatever is the value of e1, which is 1000x. You go there, you check the value of id there, which is 30, and we get 30 in the output. Okay, so this is the first system.out, which is printing out 30. Let's move further. Employee E2 equal to new employee. So another local variable will be created here in the main stack called E2. Right? Let's say it will be pointing to 3000x. See why 3000x? It's just a random location that I have chosen, right? To create a new object. So let's say at that 3000x, I create an employee object. Its ID value is 10, right? To begin with, it is 10, and E2 is rightly pointing to 3000x. Then I say e2.id equal to 40. I see where e2 is pointing to, which is 3000x. I go there and I change it to, oh sorry Rodan, you're correct. This will be 20 initially, right? Not 10. I always get confused with this 10 value here. So this will be 20 guys, because instance variable id will always be initialized with the value 20. Okay. So guys, 2 more people are joining. So let me just pause for a minute at this point. Hi Chris. Chris, are you able to hear me? Okay, great Chris. So Chris, we are in the middle of a workshop. It's okay if you don't have a mic. Feel free to ask any questions through the chat window here. And what we are actually doing right now is we are solving one problem here, right? And this is the code here. Well, this problem is already done, and so we will move on to next problem very shortly, and so you can solve that problem from beginning, right? And this session is recorded, so you guys will not be missing anything at all. Okay. So, anyways, let me finish this problem. So, guys, where were we, Satish and Pradhan? Where were we? We were at this line, right? e2.id equal to 40. Okay, great. So e2.id equal to 40, right? So what is going to happen here? E2 is pointing to where? 3000x. So you go there, you change the value of id there from 20 to 40. Okay. Next, what you are doing is you are calling a method called switch employees, right? So again, as I said, each invocation of a method creates a new stack.
खूप इन्फॉर्मेशन मिळते त्यापैकी माहिती देतात बिझनेसच्या ग्रोथसाठी असणे कॉन्फिडन्स खूप इम्पॉर्टंट आहे करेक्ट आहे आणि मला तर वाटतं आपली कंपनी जो म्हणजे तो सगळ्यात महत्वाचं कारण म्हणजे आपलं प्रेझेंटेशन देतात
Guys, we have participants, Apurva, Chris, and Michelle. So guys, will you be okay if you can just mute yourselves, because some noise is coming and that will get in the video as well. Apurva, Chris, Michelle, can you guys just click on the green icon against your name? That will actually put you on mute. You can unmute yourself whenever you have any question. Okay, Chris, is it better? It is better now, right? Okay, so guys, everyone actually needs to mute themselves, right? You just need to click on the green icon against your name. So Apurva, are you able to hear me? Okay, just 1 minute, guys. Alright guys, so let's continue. So what I was doing was I was calling a switch employees method. So people who just joined, please just excuse me for 5 minutes because I was already solving a problem. So let me just finish that one and we will move on to a new problem very shortly. Right? Just let me finish this original problem that I was discussing. Okay, so the switch employees method will be called, and as I mentioned, a new stack will be created for it. It will be something like this, switch employees stack. Okay, and in that, please note that there are two local variables, E1 and E2. Both will be created here. E1 will be created, E2 will be created. Now, please note what we are passing to the switch employees method. We are passing E2 and E1. So E2 is the first parameter that we are passing and E1 is the second parameter, right? So please note it is a little, kind of tricky that they have reversed the order here. Instead of E1, E2, they are saying E2, E1 here, right? So what is going to happen effectively is that in this switch employees stack, what will be the value of E1? So as soon as you enter inside this switch employees method, what is going to be the value of this E1 here, which is a local variable of switch employees? Yes, Bladhan, absolutely correct. It will be 3000x. As you can see, the value of E2 in the main stack was 3000x. So this E1 gets the value 3000x. And this E2 will get the value 1000x, which is the value E1 is having in the main stack, right? Now, once we are done with this, the rest of the problem is very simple, just going through the code line by line. So we say int temp equal to E1.id, right? Int temp equal to E1.id. This will create another local variable here called temp, right? And it will have the value E1.id. What is the value of E1.id? So what should I write after temp here? So guys, for everyone else also it is very simple. You just need to go through this diagram, right? You have the stack section here storing the local variables of individual methods. You have the actual objects getting created here, and you have this class data section which you can ignore for now, right? We will come to it in the next problem, right? So again, I will iterate how you can actually get the value 40, which Bladhan and Satish have written here, right? It's very simple. You are saying E1.id, right? What is the value of E1? E1 value is 3000x. You can see in the switch employee stack. You just go to that location, right, and get the value of ID from there, which is 40, right? So temp gets the value 40. After that, you are saying E1.id equal to E2.id plus 1, right? So what you need to do is you need to update E1.id, right? So let's first see where E1.id is. E1.id is at 3000x. So you go to 3000x location. And there you see that, okay, this is the value of ID that I need to update, right? So just put a star mark here, right? Just to signify that, okay, this is the location that you are going to update, right? And what you are going to update it with? You are going to update it with E2.id plus 1, right? So first let's find out E2.id, which is you go to where location where E2 is pointing to, which is 1000x. Value of ID there is 30. You add 1 to it, 31. Right, and you just store it here, right? So this gets updated. After that, you are saying E2 equal to new employee. So another employee object will be created in the heap, let's say at 4000x, right? The value of ID initially will be 20. The reason is that this ID is having an initial value of 20. It is an instance variable of the employee class, and whenever you create an employee object, the value of ID will always be 20, right? So that is what we have done here. And E2 of course will now point to this new object that you just created. So this will get the value 4000x, right? And finally you are saying in the switch employees method, E2.id equal to temp. E2.id equal to temp, so you just go to the location where E2 is pointing to, which is 4000x. You go there and the value of ID there, whatever it is, you change it to value of temp, which is 40. That's it. You are done with the switch employees method, right? This was the last line. as soon as a method invocation is over, its stack is also removed from the stack section, right? So it is gone. And effectively that's it. You have actually come to the last two lines of the main method now, right? This was the invocation of switch employees, which we just concluded. So these are the last two lines, right? And I guess you guys can guess what will be the output now. So guys, can everyone actually try to compute what will the value of e1.id and e2.id?
30 and 31.
Right, so e1.id, you just go to the location where e1 is pointing to, which is 1000x. You go there, you see the value is 30, right? So this will actually be 30, right? And e2.id, you see where e2 is pointing to, which is 3000x. You go there and you find the value, which is 31, right? So this becomes 31. Okay, what we can do is we can just run this code quickly and just confirm our output, right? That whatever we have got is correct or not. I'm in the Eclipse, so I can just run it straight away. Okay, so you can see the output is 30, 30, 31. Okay. So any questions so far? How did you find this approach? I will be using this approach in a couple of more problems. So it might seem that, okay, this approach seems to be a little cumbersome. You are making this diagram and each and everything in detail. But you know, it will actually help you a lot, because it will actually help you a lot in understanding where different things in Java class actually go, right? And once you have solved quite a few problems with this approach, you will actually have no issues in solving these kind of problems pretty quickly. I was explaining this problem, that's why I was taking my own time to actually create this diagram. But otherwise, believe me, once you have solved quite a few problems, creating this diagram will not take any time of yours at all. And in fact, you could be quite sure that whatever problem you are solving using this approach will always be correct. Any questions here so far? Okay, so guys, should we move on to the next problem then? Okay, so guys, for everyone now, the second problem that we are going to solve, again, I'm going to give you some time to solve this problem, right? And after that, I'm going to again use this heap stack diagram approach to solve that problem. Okay, now this new problem will be actually a little bit tricky and a bit more cumbersome than the one that we actually saw here, right? Okay. Here it is. Let me do one thing, guys, here. Okay, anyways, let's keep it like this. Okay, maybe let me just remove 1 or 2 lines spaces so that you can see everything in one screen. I think that's pretty much it. So, okay. This should be good enough. Now you have an alpha class, you have a main method defined inside it. There is a gamma class as well, right? And then main method, we are doing something, we are creating an alpha object, we are creating a gamma object, and we are calling something called voodoo, which is really doing some magical stuff here. And in the end, you need to tell me the output of these 3 lines. Now this question actually involves static variables as well, right? And of course instance variables. So this question will actually give you pretty much idea about everything in the diagram, right? This diagram which we created for the previous problem was actually missing the static variable thing, right? There was not a single static variable in the previous question, but now we will be having. So I will just clean up this diagram and will give you guys few minutes to solve this. Okay, so guys, you have 3-4 minutes, maybe 5 minutes to solve this. While you are solving, if you have any questions, do let me know. And people who just joined after Vladan and Satish, if you guys have any questions, again, do let me know. We actually just started the workshop about 10 minutes earlier, and that was the only problem we had solved. Okay, so you guys basically didn't miss much. So guys, should I solve this problem now, or anyone needs more time? Just let me know, feel free to let me know if you need more time, right? We have sufficient time in the workshop, and the main purpose of the workshop is to actually let you solve these problems and learn new techniques here, right? So in case anyone needs more time, just feel free to let me know. I will be more than happy to give you more time to solve this problem. Alright guys, so let me solve this problem. This is going to be lengthier one, so stay focused. Anytime, any place you face any issues, anytime when I'm explaining any step, you face any issues, just let me know. Chris, your answer is noted as well. You're saying 17, 17, 17. Great, we will see. Let's begin, right? So again, I will begin like the last problem, right? Just like the last problem. So whenever your JVM starts, right, it gets some memory from the operating system, and it is divided into 3 sections. Those 3 sections are heap, stack, and there is a section called class data. Okay. So in this case, what is going to happen is that there are 2 classes that are going to be loaded, alpha and gamma, right? So I will keep both of them here. Alpha.class, let's say it is loaded at 100x location. There is also this gamma class which will be loaded, let's say at 200x location, right? Now please note that the alpha class is having one static variable inside it, right, called sGamma, right? You can see it is a static variable, right? So in the static section of this alpha.class, what is going to happen, right? A variable called sGamma will be created, right? And please note that it is an object reference variable. It is an object reference variable, which means that its value will be always an address where the actual object is stored. Actual object in Java is always stored in heap, right? This section, right? So what you are doing here is you are saying new gamma, right? Static variables are actually initialized when the class is getting loaded, right? So at this point of time, alpha class is getting loaded, right? It has not fully loaded yet. It is getting loaded. And while it is getting loaded, all the static variables will be initialized as well, right? So this is basically a totally different topic of class loading and what actually happens, what is the exact sequence of event, right? It is basically a separate topic in OCP JP. I will not be able to go into the details of that in this workshop, because this workshop mainly focuses on the heap stack diagram approach that I'm going to discuss, right? So, okay, so this S gamma static variable will be created here, as I said, and it is being initialized, you can see, with this value called new gamma, right? So let's say in the heap at 1000x location, right, a gamma object is created, right? Because we are saying new gamma, so a new gamma object will be created, and that gamma object will be having an instance variable inside it called level, right? So an instance variable will be created here called level. Its value will be 5. Why 5? Because it is initialized with 5. Anytime you create a gamma object, it will get the value 5, right? And this S gamma static variable, now we can safely say that it is pointing to 1000x location. Fine? Any questions? So this actually kind of completes the loading of the alpha class, right? You have initialized all the static variables, and that's it. Now you can go ahead and execute its main method, right? JVM will first of all check if there is any main method inside the alpha class, right, at this 100x location. So all the methods and their bytecodes will be actually stored in this 100x location as well. Right? This is basically containing all the bytecodes of the alpha dot class, right? So method instructions will be present here only. If at this point of time JVM is not able to find the main method, right? Let's say this was main 1 or something, right? What is going to happen? You are going to get an error which is something like main method cannot be found, right? But please note that even before throwing that main method cannot be found error, it would have already done these things. That is initialization of this static variable called S gamma and creation of this gamma object, right? So you can still run some Java code even without a main method, right? You can still do that. But ultimately, of course, you will get an error in the end. Okay, let's change it back to main. Okay, so that's initialization of alpha class is over. We will start with the main method. Anytime a method is executed in Java, a stack is created for it in the stack section. So we will create a main stack section here, right? In this, the first line is alpha a equal to new alpha, right? So a local variable called a is created here. It is an object reference variable, so its value will be some memory address in the heap. Let's say 2000x. You will go to 2000x location in the heap. You will create what? An alpha object here. Please note alpha class is having an instance variable inside it called I gamma, right? Please note this is an instance variable and not a static variable, right? So this will be created here, I gamma, right? It is also being initialized here. You can see you are saying equal to new gamma. So whenever you create an alpha object, the I gamma instance variable of it will be also initialized, right? So let's say while initializing it, you create another gamma object at 3000x. So at 3000x, you create a gamma object, right? This gamma object will be having a value of level again as 5, right? The initial value. So that's it for the first line of the main method. You have successfully created an alpha object and made this local variable a in the main stack point to it. Any questions anybody is having? Right, you can see, right, a is pointing to 2000x. At 2000x you have an alpha object. It is having an instance variable inside it called I gamma, which is pointing to another location called 3000x, which is the gamma object. Okay, let's move to the next line. Gamma g equal to new gamma, the next line in the main method. So what we do here is we create a local variable called g. Anytime you call new, that means you are calling the constructor, and which means you are creating a new object in heap, right? So I will create a new object in heap here at 4000x, right? The value of level again will be 5. It is the initial value, right? And g will be pointing to this 4000x. Okay. Okay. Next, what we do is we say a dot voodoo g, right? What is voodoo? Voodoo is actually an instance method of alpha class, right? Please note it is an instance method of the alpha class. It is not a static method. What is the difference between instance method and a static method? The difference between instance method and static method is following. You can call the static method directly on a class, right? You can call the static method directly on a class. You don't need an object of that class to execute that method. Whereas for an instance method, you always need an object. You need to have an object of a class to call any instance method of that class, right? Otherwise, you cannot call an instance method of a class, right? So when we create a Voodoo stack here, right, because we are calling the Voodoo method here, right, at this line. So when we do that, what I'm going to do is I am going to keep track of on which object this Voodoo method was called, right? So can anyone tell me the location of the object on which this Voodoo method has been called? Just check from the diagram and let me know. Which is the object on which this Voodoo method has been called? Line 3 in the main method. 2000x, right? Great. So what I will do is I will just write 2000x, right? Just to keep track of, okay, that this Voodoo method has been called on an object which is at 2000x location. Okay. Now we go inside the Voodoo method. There is a local variable inside it called gamma. Well, input local variable, not exactly local variable, but an input local variable. So it will be also created in the Voodoo stack here. So I will say gamma here. What will be the value of gamma? You can see that we are passing some value to the Voodoo method in the main method, right? Which will be given to this gamma input local variable of Voodoo. Yes, absolutely. It will be 4000x, right? Because we are passing G, right? And the value of G, as you can see in the diagram, everything is there in the diagram. Okay. This is the benefit of making the diagram. Everything is already there in the diagram. You just need to move through it. So you will see that, okay, the value of G is 4000. So this gamma will also get the value 4000. Okay. That's it. You come to the Voodoo method. The first line is gamma dot level equal to 10. So you go to the location where gamma is pointing to, which is 4000x here, right? And you change the value of level from 5 to 10. Okay. Now the next line, I gamma equal to gamma. Now this is a little confusing line. I gamma equal to gamma. How will JVM resolve this line, right? So JVM will basically do following. JVM will first of all check if there is any local variable called I gamma, right? So local variables always have higher preference than instance variable, meaning if there is a local variable which is having the same name as an instance variable or a static variable, the local variable will basically hide that instance or static variable, right? That is also actually called as shadowing in Java. Local variable is shadowing the instance variable or the static variable with the same name. Okay, we will see that happen in this example, in this code shortly, right? But at this line it is not happening because till now there is no local variable called I gamma, right? You can see in the stack here, there is no local variable called I gamma. So this is definitely the instance variable I gamma, and this is the instance variable I gamma of which object? The object which is at 2000x location, right? Because we have called this Voodoo method on the object which is at 2000x location, and inside it you are accessing the instance variable I gamma of the same object, right? Is everyone clear about it? Right. So how will you update it? When you say I gamma equal to gamma, you will just see that, okay, Voodoo method was called on 2000x, right? So you will simply go there and you will change the value of I gamma here, and you will change it to 4000x. Why 4000x? Because you are saying I gamma equal to gamma. Gamma is having the value 4000x in the Voodoo stack, and this gets pasted here. Right? That's why it is very important to actually just write down the object on which it is called, right? Because otherwise you will forget on which object that method was called, and you will have to move a little backward to find that out. It's always note down the object number on which an instance method has been called. Okay, next line is gamma dot level equal to 12, which is again simple. You just go to the location where gamma is pointing to, which is 4000x. You go there and change the value of level from whatever it is right now to 12. Okay, next line, gamma I gamma equal to new gamma. Right, now we have a local variable with the same name as instance variable, right? So anyways, it will be created here. So you will say I gamma, right? I gamma local variable will be created. Let's say it is pointing to 5000x, and at 5000x I create a gamma object, right? I create a gamma object, and the value of level initially will be 5. Right? Because that is the initial value of level, as you can see from here, right? It will be given this value level 5, right? And I gamma is correctly pointing to this 5000x location, right? Now in the next line, when you say I gamma dot level equal to 14, right? When you say I gamma dot level equal to 14, JVM will again follow the same sequence of steps. It will first of all check whether I gamma is a local variable, right? And it will see that, okay, it is actually a local variable, right? So it will not go and update the instance variable I gamma, but rather the local variable I gamma, right? So it will see that, okay, the value of I gamma is 5000x. It will go there, right? And it will change the value of level from whatever it is right now to 14. Any questions anybody is having till now? Lots of things going on here, so just wanted to stop for maybe a few seconds here to just let everyone see if they have any doubts so far. So we are basically at this line. Okay, so you guys good? All right, let's move forward then. So the next is S gamma dot level equal to 7, right? Again, JVM will do the following. It will first of all check whether S gamma is a local variable. You will just simply check in the stack. There is no local variable called S gamma, right? Then it will check if there is any instance variable or static variable called S gamma. Well, you cannot have an instance variable and static variable with the same name. If you try to do that, you will have a compilation error, right? So you cannot have a question like who in instance variable or a static variable will be given a preference, right? Because there is no question of preference there. Only one of them can be there, right? So you cannot have both instance variable and the static variable with the same name. So anyways, this S gamma will come out to be a static variable. You can see in the static variable section here, right? And when you say S gamma dot level equal to 7, from here we will do the modification. So we will go to the location where S gamma is pointing to, which is 1000x. We go there and we change the value of level to 7. Okay. Then we say gamma S gamma equal to new gamma, right? This next line. So here what is going to happen? A local variable called S gamma will be created, right? It will get the value, let's say 6000x, some new location. So at that new location, I am going to create a gamma object with the value of level being 5. Right, the value of level being 5 again, because this is the initial value that the level gets, right? And S gamma is correctly pointing to this new gamma object, right? So now you do have a local variable with the same name as the static variable S gamma. So in the next line, when you say S gamma dot level equal to 9, right? We will not go to this static variable and change the value of level from there, right? No, we will not do that, because now we have a local variable called S gamma, and it will basically hide that static variable, right? So we will instead go here. So we will go to the location 6000x and we will change the value level here, which will become 9. Okay. Now The next line, this dot I gamma dot level equal to 16. Another thing to learn here. You use this keyword in Java to refer to the current object. So when you say this dot I gamma, right, it means the instance variable I gamma of the current object. If you do not say this, right, so for example, if I remove this, right, this I gamma will be referring to the local variable I gamma, right? As you know that a local variable always hides the instance variable or the static variable with the same name, right? The only way to prevent that from happening is appending this. So when you append this here, right, it means you are explicitly referring to the instance variable. JVM doesn't have to resolve anything here, right? You are explicitly telling it that, okay, look, I need to modify the instance variable and not the local variable. So when you say this dot I gamma dot level equal to 16, what is going to happen? You're going to go to this. This is basically 2000x, right? So you go to the 2000x location, right? This refers to the current object, right, which is 2000x. So you go there, right? And this is the I gamma that you need to change. So, well, you don't need to change I gamma. You need to go to the object there and change the value of level. So I gamma is pointing to 4000x. You go there, right? And this is the level that you need to change. And what is the new value that you need to provide here? Instead of 12, now it will be great. It will be 16. So it will become 16 now. Then when you are saying I gamma dot level equal to 11 in the next line, note here we are not appending this. Right here we are not appending this, which means we are referring to the local variable I gamma. So this I gamma, so we go to the location where I gamma is pointing to, which is 5000x. We go there and we change the value of level from whatever it is 14 right now, to 11. Okay. Then we are saying alpha dot s gamma equal to this I gamma. Now we noted how to prevent shadowing of instance variable by using the this keyword, right? We noted how you can prevent shadowing of instance variable using the this keyword. You can do the same thing for static variables as well, right? You can prevent shadowing of static variables by appending the class name before the static variable, because that makes it explicitly clear to the JVM that this is the static variable that you intend to modify. So when you say alpha dot s gamma equal to this dot I gamma, you are basically trying to modify this s gamma, the static variable, and not this one, because this is a local variable. Right? So when you say alpha dot s gamma equal to this dot I gamma, you need to modify this one. And can anyone tell me what should be the new value here? Instead of 1000x, it will be now . So guys, this will be actually an address. It will not be the value of level. It will be just an address. So the address will be this dot I gamma, right? This is 2000x, right? So you go to location 2000x and there the value of I gamma is 4000x, right? So that is what you will put here, 4000x. Okay, clear? Great. We move to the next line then, alpha dot s gamma dot level equal to 17. Now this is simple, right? All you need to do is find out alpha dot s gamma, which is 4000x, right? This one, right? And change the value of level there from 16 to whatever the new value is, which is 17. Right? And then you are saying s gamma dot level equal to 19. Again, you are using s gamma directly, which means it is the local variable and not the static variable s gamma. This is the s gamma local variable, so you go to that 6000x location, change the value of level there from 9 to 19. That's it. You are done with this voodoo method. It was a pretty long method, but anyways, it's done now. So as soon as a method is over, its stack is also removed. Okay, so can people now try to guess the output of these three lines? We are done with the voodoo method, so we have just 3 system.out to execute, right? All you need to do is just find out the value of g, and you have all the information in the diagram. Find out the value of G, find out the value of level there, find out the value of A, find out the value of I gamma there, and then corresponding level, and same thing for the last one. So again, quick 2 minutes for you guys to figure this out, right? Try to just go through the diagram here and tell me the output. So Chris, you got it correct, right? 17, 17, and 17. So guys, it will be great if each one of you can actually try to get the output here as 17, 17, 17. Right? I just want to be sure that everyone is on the same page here and they have understood this approach correctly. We have one more problem in which we will be using this, but it will actually involve arrays. We haven't seen any arrays in this approach so far, right? So adding arrays will basically cover everything, right? We have covered static variables, we have covered instance variables, we have covered local variables, we had static methods, we had instance methods. The only thing that is left is now is arrays. So before I actually move to that problem which will actually have arrays, I just want to make sure that everyone is fine here. So Shejat, Michelle, you guys fine here? You guys joined a little late, so I'm sorry, but some portion of the workshop was missed. But again, as I mentioned repeatedly, the workshop is being recorded, so you will be able to review that portion again. If you guys want to ask anything, just let me know. So answer is going to be in fact 17, 17, and 17. I will quickly show you how that it is. So G dot level, you go to the location where G is pointing to, which is 4000x, right? This one, and there the value of level is 17, right? Then you have A dot I gamma dot level, right? A is pointing to 2000x. You go to that location, right? You find out the value of I gamma there, which is again 4000x, and at 4000x the value of gamma level is 17, right? So again 17, and the last one is alpha dot s gamma dot level, right? So s gamma here, alpha dot s gamma, this is the static variable s gamma, which is pointing to 4000x, right? Which is this one again, and there the value of level is 17 again. Okay, let me just run this code quickly just to confirm the output. Okay, so you can see the output as 17, 17, and 17. So guys, are you enjoying the workshop? Or is it getting a little boring or anything like that? Okay guys, so let's move to next problem. Okay, let's move to the next problem, which is zoo management. So this is again an interesting problem. Bit lengthy again, but will be fun to solve this one too. Let me actually explain few classes here, because the code is a bit long and you might not be able to see all the classes together, right? So these last set of classes are very simple, right? You have a class called animal, right? Then you have a class called tiger, which is extending from animal, lion, leopard, and wolf, jackal, and fox, right? Just remember that, okay, these are animals, that's it. They have a string, two-string method defined inside them, which will just print what kind of animal it is, right? So if you print, you have an object of lion, it will print I am a lion. If you have an object of leopard, it will print I am a leopard, and so on, right? So I'm going to scroll up now, because these classes are taking too much of space here, and you actually don't need to see them, right? Because they are not containing any meaningful thing inside them, like an instance variable or static variable. Okay, so I'll just scroll up. And okay, I'm being too generous with the spaces here, so let me just compact this a little bit so that you all can see everything together. Okay, again, the Zeus toString method, you don't need to worry about it, right? It is again just printing out the value of IDs and animals, right? That's it. You don't need to worry about what this toString method is doing, right? You can assume that it is just printing out the value of IDs and animals that this zoo is containing, right? So this is the code that you need to solve. You are creating two zoos object here, then you are mixing them, right? And after mixing them, the value of animals and IDs would have changed inside it, right? So making this sort of diagram will again help a lot here to solve this problem. Okay, so again you have about 5-7 minutes, and once you are done, feel free to tell me your output. Of course, if you have any questions, again to let me know. Meanwhile, I'm going to just remove this folder diagram from here. So you guys can just tell me the animals and IDs that will be there in the end, right? Don't need to worry about the exact implementation of toString. So guys, sorry for the distraction here, but just wanted to confirm one thing. I will be just holding a lucky draw towards the end of this workshop. So just confirm if these are the email IDs of you. So those who, the main purpose was that those who are present till the end of workshop, there will be a lucky draw. So just please check the list of IDs here and let me know if your email ID is missing from here. Let me just check. Chris, this one is yours, right? Okay. Bladan, yours is pretty clear. Satish, yours is also pretty clear. And Shazad, this one is yours, right? Oh, Shazad, are you there? Okay, we will assume that this is Shazad's email ID then, which I got from the registration. Okay, so anyways, back to the problem. We will be holding it towards the end. Okay, we have one answer from Pradhan. Other people can also try it out. Sure, Chris, take your time. Okay, wait. So guys, let's begin and solve this one now. Okay. We have answers from people here, so let's begin. Again, I will do the same thing. I will create a heap. I will create a stack section here, and I will create a class data. We actually don't need the class data section here because there are no static variables, but still I will just create it. I will keep it empty because otherwise it can be quite confusing to actually populate it when you actually don't need it, right? So I will just keep it empty, but I will keep it there for reference, right? That there is something called class data. Okay, so we will start with the main method here. In the main method, of course, you will first of all create the stack for the main method. Right? In the main method, the first line is zoo1 equal to new zoo, right? So a local variable here called zoo1 will be created, which will be pointing to, let's say, 100x. And at 100x location in the heap, right? At 100x location in the heap, you will have a zoo object, right? And you can see that zoo is having two arrays inside it. One array is of IDs and another array is of animals. Arrays are also object references, right? So what is going to happen? You will have two instance variable here, IDs and animals, right? Now whenever you do not initialize an object reference instance variable or an object reference static variable, they get the default value. The default value is null, right? So what I will do is I will say null here. Right, and zoo1 is correctly pointing to 100x. Now you say zoo1.id is equal to new int array. Right, you are creating an integer array. So what is going to happen? Let's say at 200x location, you create an array object. The size of this array is 3. You can see, right? So an array will be created with space for 3 values here. These are primitive values, right? So they will be put directly here, right? So what I will do is I will put 5 here, 1 here, and 2 here. So this creates your integer array. It is at 200x location, and you said zoo1.id is equal to this new integer array, right? So the IDs variable here, zoo1 is pointing to 100x. You go there and you change the value of IDs there from whatever it is right now, which is null, to 200x. Okay, then you say zoo1.animals equal to this new animal array, right? So let's do that. For that, first of all, let's create these animal objects, right? Lion, tiger, leopard, and fox. So let's create them first of all somewhere in the heap, right? Each object is created at separate location in the heap, right? So let's create that. So you will have at 300x a lion object. At 400x, let's say a leopard object, and at 500x you will have a fox object. Alright, and what you are doing is you are creating an array in which these will be put. So you will create, let's say, an array at 600x location. This is an array object, right? And this array is also of size 3, you can see, right? And instead of storing directly the objects of lion, leopard, and fox, you will be storing references of them because this is an object reference array, right? In primitive array, we actually stored the value directly, but here we will be storing the addresses, right? So here you will get 3000x at 0th index, 400x at the first index, and 500x at the next index. Okay, any questions so far? Okay, then we create the second zoo2 object as done in the main method. These 3 lines, so I will do these 3 lines pretty quickly because this is just a repetition of the first 3 lines. So zoo2 will be created here. Let's say at which is the location left in the heap, let's say at 700x location. So at 700x location you create a zoo object, right? It will have again an IDs which will be initially null and animals which will be initially null, but soon IDs will get some value, right? Because we are creating an integer array here. So let's say at 800x you create an array object, right, which is going to have values 3, 4 and 6, right, and this IDs will get the value 800x here, correct? And you can see it is pointing to that. And next we are going to create an animal array, right? But before that, let's create these 3 animals in the heap somewhere, right? So let's create them. 900x, 1000x and 1100x, right? So at 900x we have a tiger object, at 1000x we have a jackal object, and lastly we have a wolf object, right? And at 1200x location, let's create that animal array which is containing these animals, right? So what we are going to do is we are just going to say 900x, 1000x and 1100x here. Okay, and the animals here will be pointing to this 1200x. Okay, so we are done with the initialization part here. We just need to call the mix method. Any question anyone is having? Sure, Chris, go ahead. No, Chris. In actual, what is going to happen is, first of all, the animal array will be created, right? It will be initialized with null, null, null inside it, and then it will be initialized one by one, right? And of course, then during the initialization of that array, the lion, leopard, and fox will be created. So first of all, you will get the array animal, right? Which will be of size 3, right? And it will be having null, null, null inside it. But again, it will be like an atomic operation, so you will not be able to basically separate the statements out. Right? But yes, it will not happen like what I did in the diagram, that is creating the animals first and then creating the complete array with it, right? If you break it down instruction by instruction, it will be like, first of all, an array is created with size 3, right, with null, null, null inside it. Then each animal will be created, lion, leopard and fox, right, and then their reference will be put inside the array, right? Thanks for asking that question though, right? Okay, great. Let's move to the next line, which is calling the mix method. So I come here and I create a mix stack. The mix method is taking 2 parameters, zoo1 and zoo2, which are basically the same one from the main stack. So zoo1 will get the value 100x and zoo2 will get the value 700x. Okay. Now zoo1.id is 0 equal to zoo2.id is 2. Right? Pretty simple to evaluate this through the diagram. Zoo2.id is 2. Let's first of all find this out. Zoo2 is pointing to 700x. Just go there, find out the value of id is there. 800x, you go to 800x and get the value which is at the second index, which is this one. So 6 is the value that you need to put, and you need to put it where? You need to put it at zoo1.id 0. So zoo1.id 0 is, zoo1 is 100x. You go there, value of id is 200x, this one, and this is the value that you need to modify. Right, and you need to put 6 here. Oh, Chris, animals are null at 100x. Okay, sorry, I think I missed to update it, but animals here will be 200x. Okay, sorry, I think I just created the animals but forgot to actually update the animals variable there. But that's okay now, right? Clear to everyone? Thanks for pointing that out, Chris. Okay. Right, so this actually completes the first line. We put the value 6 here because IDs is pointing to that 200x location, and we put 6 here. Next line is zoo1.animals1 equal to zoo2.animals0, right? zoo2.animals0, right? Let's find that out. zoo2 is pointing to 700x. You go there, value of animals there is 1200x, right? Which is this one, and the animal at 0th index is 900x. So you need to put this 900x animal at zoo1.animals1. So zoo1.animals1, zoo1 is pointing to 100x, animals there is 200x, right? And at 200x, oh sorry, again big mistake. This should not be 200x, this should be 600x, right? Animals array was actually created here. 200x was actually the IDs array, right? So animals array is created at 600x. So this is the location that you need to modify. You go to that location 600x, right? And here, this is the index that you need to change, right? zoo1.animals1, which is this one. So you will change this from 400x to 900x. Sorry for the confusion here. Is this step clear, or should I repeat it? zoo1.animals1 equal to zoo2.animals0. Okay. Now then we will move to the next line. zoo2.animals1 equal to new lion. So zoo2.animals1, zoo2 is pointing to 700x. You go there, right? And you find out the animals there, which is 1200x, which is here, and this is the location that you need to change, right? Right now at first index you are having 1000x, but now it will be some new location, a new location where there will be a lion object. So first of all you create a lion object here, right? And then you put that location here. Okay, you put that location here, 1300x. And okay, that's it from this line. Then this line is zoo2.animals2 equal to zoo1.animals1, right? zoo2.animals2, zoo2 is pointing to 700x. You go to 700x there, animals is pointing to 1200x. You go there, and animal at the second index it's 1100x, right? So you need to change this to something else, which is zoo1.animals1. So let's find out the value of zoo1.animals1. zoo1 is pointing to 100x. You go there, find out the value of animals there, which is 600x, right? And at 600x, the animal at the first index is 900x, right? So you need to put 900x here. Right. Next is zoo2.id is 1 equal to 6. So zoo2 is pointing to 700x. You go there, value of IDs there is 800x. You go there and you change the first index here from 4 to 6. zoo2.id is 0 equal to zoo1.id is 2. First of all, let's evaluate zoo1.id is 2. zoo1 is pointing to 100x. You go there, value of IDs there is 200x. You go there, and the second index value here is 2, right? So you need to put 2 somewhere, and you need to put that 2 to zoo2.id 0. zoo2 is pointing to 700x. You go there, find out the value of id is 800x, and at 0th index you need to put this value, which is 2. So this becomes 2. Next, you are saying zoo2 equal to new zoo, right? So you are creating a new zoo object here at 1400x location. Let's say you are creating a new zoo object, right? As soon as you create a zoo object, it will have an IDs variable inside it, which will be null, and also an animals array, which will be also null, right? You said zoo2 equal to new zoo, right? So this zoo2, which was 700x, will now be pointing to 1400x, right? It will now be pointing to 1400x. Then you say zoo2.animals equal to zoo1.animals, right? So zoo2.animals, which is this one, right? 1400x. 1400x animals. You are saying zoo2.animals equal to zoo1.animals. So zoo1.animals, you go to the location where zoo1 is pointing to, which is 100x. The value of animals there is 600x, right? So this becomes 600x. Right? Zoo2.id is equal to zoo1.ids. So again, you're just copying the value of IDs from zoo1, which is 200x there. So this will become 200x as well. Then lastly, you are saying, sorry, second last line, zoo1.animals0 equal to zoo2.animals2. So let's find out zoo2.animals2. Zoo2 is pointing to 1400x. You go there. Value of animals there is 600x. You go there, and the second animal here, or rather the animal at the second index 0, 1, 2 is 500x. So let me note this value 500x, right? And we need to put it at zoo1.animals0, right? So zoo1 is pointing to 100x, right? Value of animals there is 600x. You go to that location, and here instead of 300x, now this new value will be 500x. Okay, and the last line, zoo1.ids2 equal to zoo2.ids1. So zoo2.ids1, what it is? Zoo2 is pointing to 1400x. You go there, value of IDs there is 200x. You come here, right? And ID at the at the first index is 1. So this is the value that you need to put, and you need to put it at zoo1.ids2, right? So zoo1 is pointing to 100x. You go there, right? Value of IDs is 200x. You come here, right? And you are saying IDs 2, which is this location, right? So this one will have the value 1 here. Okay, that's it. After that, you just return from this method altogether, right? Mix method is over. This was the last line. So I will remove the mix tag, right? And that is it. We are done. We have come to the last 2 lines of the main method. We just need to print out the contents of zoo1 and zoo2. So can you guys figure out the animals and the IDs now? Let's see what it is, right? So zoo1, right? So you're printing out zoo1, right? So zoo1 is pointing to 100x, 100x zoo1, ID's value is 200x. So you have an array 611, right? So you should have something like 6, 1, and 1 in IDs, right? And what are the animals it is containing? Animals are at 600x. So if you go to 600x, there are 3 animals here: 500x, 900x, and 500x. At 500x you have fox, 900x you have tiger, and 500x you have again fox, right? So I will just put their initials F, T, and F, right? Fox, tiger, and fox, right? So this should be the output for the first zoo. And second one, right, array is this one, 266, right? And the animals that will be there inside it is this array. Zoo2 is pointing to 700x, animals there are at 1200x, right? So this one. 900x, you have what? A tiger, right? 1300x, you have a lion, and finally you have what here? 900x, tiger again, right? So this should be the final output: 611, fox, tiger, and fox; 266, tiger, lion, and tiger, right? Let's run this code once and see that. Okay, so you can see the output: 6, 1, and 1. I'm a fox, I'm a tiger, I'm a fox. 266, I'm a tiger, I'm a lion, I'm a tiger. Okay, so this confirms the output that we have got here. So guys, I know that this diagrammatic approach actually took a lot of time, but in the exam you will not be given such lengthy problems, first thing. Second thing is you will be able to make this diagram pretty quickly because you will not be explaining it to anyone there, right? So any questions anyone is having from here? Anything you want to ask in this heap stack diagram approach that I have talked here? You guys still there? Are you guys able to hear me? Okay. Chris, go ahead with your question. Yes, absolutely, Chris. Zoo2 from main stack will never be the same as Zoo2 from mix, right? How can they be? They are different local variables located at different locations in the stack, right? The only thing is that Zoo2 of mix was initialized with the value that Zoo2 was having in the main stack. That's it. After that, they do not have any relation between them at all, right? Yes, you change that, right? You see this line here, right? Zoo2 equal to new zoo, right? So as soon as you did that, you changed the reference of Zoo2 in the mix to something else, right? Till this point of time, it was pointing to the same location where Zoo2 of main method was pointing to, right? But as soon as you said Zoo2 equal to new zoo, right? Now you are instructing the JVM that, okay, make Zoo2 point to a completely new location. Before this line, you didn't do that. You were just changing the object at which Zoo2 is pointing to. But here, basically you just change the Zoo2 altogether. Okay, great. So if there are no questions, let's just do some ramp up stuff. We will be having a lucky draw just in a while. So guys, just let me now give you a brief overview of the training. So this is how the training will be conducted. Now you have a fair idea of how the training will be conducted, right? So this was the actual portion of the training, you can say, right? This is exactly how the complete training will be conducted. So let me just start from here. In fact, let me start from this slide, because some people might have missed it. So my credentials are following. I am OCP-JP certified. I did my OCWCD certification as well. I was previously the trainer at WizLabs, right? Till few months back, I was giving trainings at WizLabs, but now I have started trainings of my own. Right? I'm no longer associated with WizLabs. This is completely my own training. I have trained well over 1,000 professionals, and I have training experience of more than 4 years. Now about the training that I will be conducting, the training that I will be conducting will be a 4-day OCP-JP6 training. Day 5 if required basically means that we will try to complete the syllabus in 4 days. But in case we are not able to, it can be easily extended to day 5, right? I am the only person in this training company, you can say, so you don't need to be worrying about whom should I talk to for this issue and that issue. For every issue you will need to just talk to me. Right? So that I hope is a good part, because you will not need to talk to multiple persons. For any issue in anything, just need to talk to me. So anyways, day 5 is extra, right? So in case people feel that, okay, we need an extra day, definitely that can be provided. Currently, I'm putting the training dates as following: 24th January, 25th January, Saturday, Sunday, and again Saturday, Sunday on 31st January and the 1st February. So one question to you all guys. So are you guys comfortable attending the training usually on weekends or on weekdays? I'm just asking a general question. Even if you don't want to attend the training, that's fine. I just want to get an idea what people actually usually prefer. Okay, weekends I can see. Okay, so that's good. So anyways, you can see that the 24th January weekend it will be starting. all the sessions will be recorded just like I'm doing a recording right now, and I will be putting this recording of the demo session of this workshop on the OCP JP training website, right? And you can find that video there, I think, by tomorrow. Okay, and also I will be providing Enthuware's exam simulator, right? So along with this training, you obviously need some exam simulator to practice with, right? Otherwise, how will you actually prepare for the actual exam? So I will be providing you an Enthuware's exam simulator. Enthuware is probably the best exam simulator these days, right? You can actually check it out on their website. They have great reviews, and I personally actually use them when I was doing OCP-JP certification and OCWCD certification as well. Okay, and of course you will have full support for any doubts, any questions post training until you give your certification exam. Right, I still have clear doubts for people whom I gave training, let's say 6 months or maybe an even year back. Right, and I will be providing a 40 days to OCP JP exam plan. That is, with training you will get a 40 days instructions on what you should do each day so that you are fully prepared for OCP JP exam in 40 days. Our training curriculum, I will be following this book SCJP 6 Study Guide by Khetri Sierra and Bert Bates. I'm quite sure you all are familiar with it. Right? This is the schedule for day 1. Few topics from there. Then day 2. Right? You can see 3 topics I will be covering on day 2. Day 3, collections and generics. It is a big topic. So day 3 is not having much things apart from collection and generics, and of course some part of APIs. And then day 4 we will have another important topic, which is threads and concurrency. And of course we will be ramping up the rest of the OCP JP syllabus in that. And that's it. As I said, a day 5 of training is also possible depending upon what all we have covered till day 4. I actually believe in going slow rather than going fast and covering everything. Right? I believe in actually going slow so that each one of the participant understands. And if after day 4 we say that we see that okay, even one topic is left, we will have a full day 5 of 6 hours in which we can have more practice questions and other doubts clearing sessions, etc. Right? So depending upon the requirement, we can have day 5 as well. Okay, so now the training cost, right? This is, I think, the important part. So the training cost will be $195. So it will be just $195. Original cost is $350, right? But for this first training of this year, I'm giving a newer discount of 45%. So you will just need to pay $195, and it will include everything. It will include training, complete training. It will include the simulator cost as well. So you don't need to actually pay for the simulator extra. Simulator is included inside it, right? And you will be provided the session videos as well. Of course, and the training material as well, like the code snippets that we will be having and the code snippets, anything that we will be using in the training will be provided to you. And again, another thing, you don't need to pay this amount upfront, this $195. You can forget about it at least for day 1 and day 2, right? So just attend day 1 and day 2 of the training without paying anything. Right? You don't need to actually providing any information regarding how will you make the payment, etc. Right? Don't need to do that. Just attend half of the training, day 1 and day 2, without paying anything. If you do not like the training, that's okay. You can just you don't need to pay anything at all. If, however, you like day 1 and day 2 and you want to attend day 3 and day 4, then you can decide to make this payment. Okay, even in that, if you want to just pay the half the amount, that is, let's say $100, you can pay that, and after day 3 and day 4 are over, you can then make the full payment. So again, it's like no one will be taking that money from you unless you are satisfied with the training. You don't need to make any payment. Okay, so that's pretty much it from the training side as well. If you guys have any questions, do let me know. Otherwise, we can move on to the lucky draw. Any questions? Chris, Satish, Siddharth, Vladan? Okay, great. So let's move here. Okay, one small question to begin with. Can anyone figure out, okay, so again, this is a Java program which will be actually doing this lucky draw here. So, okay, this is the code which will actually select some n number of participants, right, from this complete list of participants, right? And I can see one problem in this. So can anyone identify this, any problem in this code? Right, so what it basically is doing is that you give it a list of all the participants and you say how many participants you want to retain, right? Or how many participants are the lucky participants, you can say, right? This method is doing that, and in the end it is returning you lucky ones array, which will be basically of size n. Any problem you see in this? Okay, so let me walk through this one by one. Oh, I'm sorry. I think I actually, I did a blunder. I actually used the correct selector instead of the incorrect selector, right? So this was the incorrect selector. I need to tell you the problem now because I showed you the correct code. This was the partial selector. It was a partial selector because what it was doing was, it was first of all creating a lucky ones array of size n, right? And after that, it was just iterating n times, and each time it was calling random.nextInt, right? Random.nextInt basically generates an integer value between 0 to whatever value you specify here, right? Now, if you do this, there is a chance that duplicate values can be inserted inside this array, right? Right? Because this is a random number generation, right? So if you ask it to generate 5 random numbers, it can say, let's say 4, 3, 4, 2 and 1, right? So 4 can be repeated twice, which you do not want, right? Why will you want an entry for a person twice, right? So this is the problem here. It was not doing that. So a person can, this can be partial to a person whose ID was repeated twice here or generated randomly twice, right? So I took care of it in this selector here. So this selector is actually having this hash set which is storing the already selected IDs, and before I actually put this ID inside this lucky ones, I check whether it is already selected or not, right? So this way this will be unique. Okay, anyways, that's was this part. So okay, now I'm just going to run this code. So this is going to run twice. First of all, I am going to show 2 shortlisted participants, and then finally there will be one who will be the winner. And again, the prize is not that much. It is just a $25 Amazon voucher. I hope you will be able to get something from it, right? Just a gesture of you guys joining the workshop here, right? So anyways, just confirm again that these IDs are yours and no one else is listed here. Okay, so let me run this code then. Okay, so we are going to see 2 lucky ones from you first of all. Okay, so we have Satish and Shazad, I think, as the 2 shortlisted participants so far. So Satish and Shazad, one from you will be actually the winner. So you can see 2 shortlisted participants. Let me see who is the winner now. And Satish, so you are the winner. I will be sending you the details of the voucher shortly, Satish. Okay. So guys, that's it. Congratulations, Satish. And thanks everyone for joining the workshop. keep checking the website for more details. In case you are interested in attending the training, just send me an email, right? And we can take it further from there, right? It was great to have you guys here. I will be putting up the recording of the session on the website soon, and I will intimate you guys about that. So before we leave, anyone is having any questions?